welcome to chapter 12. As this chapter begins, we will review how general economic conditions and income affect the way we spend our money. Then, to reflect the statement that says the rich are different, we will explore how people who occupy different positions in the society consume in very different ways. Consumer demand for goods and services depends on both our ability and our willingness to buy. Although demand for necessities tends to be stable over time, we postpone or we eliminate other expenditures if we don't feel that now is a good time to spend money. Discretionary income is the money available to a household over and above what it requires to have a comfortable standard of living. Then, how much money do people need to be comfortable? One study that analyzed survey data from more than 450,000 respondents concluded that the magic number is an annual income of $75,000. Emotional well being steadily rises as people get to this level, which is again $75,000 yearly. But surprisingly, the emotional well being does not significantly increase after that number. How we spend money varies based on our attitudes toward money. There are two different kind of people: tightwads and spendthrifts. Tightwads hate to spend their money and they actually experience emotional pain when they make purchases. In contrast, spendthrifts enjoy nothing more than spending. Frugality seems to be driven by a pleasure of saving, compared to tightwadism, which is driven by a pain of paying. So tightwads hate spending their money, they want to save all the time. On the other hand, spendthrifts love shopping, love paying. They purchase for themselves, they purchase for others. For them, the happiness comes from spending their money. Behavioral economics is also called economic psychology. It is the study of the human side of economic decisions. Consumers' beliefs about what the future holds are an indicator of consumer confidence. Consumer confidence is a measure of how optimistic or pessimistic people are about the future health of the economy and how they predict they will fare down the road. These beliefs are important because they influence how much money people pump into the economy when they make discretionary purchases. When people are somewhat pessimistic about their prospects and about the state of the economy, as they are now with the COVID 19, they tend to cut back on what they spend and take on less debt. When consumers feel optimistic about the future, they reduce the amount they save, they take on more debt, and they splurge on discretionary items. A range of factors influence the overall savings rate. These are including individual consumers' pessimism or optimism about their personal circumstances, such as a sudden increase in personal wealth as a result of an inheritance, and global events such as the Great Recession. Okay, now take a moment to think about this. The 80 richest people in the world are worth $1.9 trillion. This is about the same amount shared by the 3.5 billion people who are in the bottom half of the world's income. And the most affluent 1% of people worldwide control more than half the globe's total wealth. In the last few years, the label 1%er entered into the vocabulary. Beginning with the Occupy Wall Street movement, where we saw protesters camping out in the cities across the United States, the spotlight has been on the people who earn the top 1% of income in the United States. Today, one of the biggest issues we hear about is income inequality. I'm sure you have heard about it. That is the extent to which resources are distributed unevenly within a population. Citigroup strategists coined the term plutonomy to describe an economy that is driven by a fairly small number of rich people. Recent reports and research indicate that the United States has the largest income inequality among developed countries, which is sad. The only countries with a bigger disparity are Chile, Mexico, and where I am from and where my family lives, of course, Turkey. We have a huge, drastic income inequality between people within the population. Social mobility refers to the passage of individuals from one social class to another. It's the transfer of individuals. Horizontal mobility occurs when a person moves from one position to another that is roughly equal. An example, when a nurse becomes an elementary school teacher, horizontal mobility has been occurred because they are both same level of social class levels, being a nurse or being an elementary school teacher. Upward mobility means moving to a higher status. On the other hand, downward movement is losing social status. Downward mobility is, of course, a movement none of us wants, but unfortunately, we observe this pattern fairly often as farmers and other displaced workers go on welfare rolls or join the ranks of the homeless. Overall, though, most people remain in their social class. The improvements people make are not sufficient to shift them into a whole other class. The only exception is when someone marries someone who is much richer. Two factors contribute to an overall upward income trajectory: a shift in women's roles and increases in educational attainment. Mothers with preschool children are the fastest growing segment of working people, which I find it adorable. I find it very empowered. I truly support women in the work life in business world. Anyways, furthermore, many of the women work in high-paying occupations such as medicine and architecture, which men used to dominate. Although picking up the tab for college often is a great sacrifice, I'm telling you, it still pays off in the long run. The college wage premium, which describes the gap between what workers with a college degree earn compared to those without one, has grown dramatically. Compared to a premium of about 40% in the late 1970s, today degree holders actually earn 80% more. So keep working for your degrees, guys. It's gonna pay in the long run. It's gonna pay off. I know right now it's a great sacrifice, but it's gonna pay off. Even research shows that. Many marketers try to target affluent, upscale markets. This, of course, often makes sense because these consumers obviously have the resources to spend on costly luxury products that command higher profit margins. However, it is a mistake to assume that we should place everyone with a high income into the same market segment. As we discussed previously, Social class involves more than absolute income. It is also a way of life and several factors, including where they got their money, how they got it, and how long they have had it, significantly affect wealthy people's interests and spending priorities. For example, this is a new study in the US that revealed that 48% of affluent consumers who has a high income reported that they feel guilty buying luxury goods and expensive goods in the current economic climate, while people are losing right now their jobs because of the virus, because of the pandemic, and because of the economic instability, because many people are in having very hard time keeping their jobs. Companies are cutting out employees and incomes levels are decreasing, blah blah blah. And this very sad economic conditions, affluent consumers are actually feeling guilty of buying luxury and expensive goods, and that's where they're not buying. For example, this is a reason, this is a factor that impacts how affluent consumers spend their money. For the ones who have never heard about an affluent consumer, who is an affluent consumer? Affluent consumers perceive themselves as important, valuable customers, and they expect to be recognized and treated as such at every point in the customer life cycle. Those are people with net wealth between $100,000 to $1 million yearly across the entire income spectrum, so anywhere between minimum $100,000 to 1 million. It makes up an important consumer group because, as you see, um, in all around the world, the luxury consumption is increasing and they're consumed by affluent consumers. As you see in China in 2017 was around $117 billion, but in 2024 it is expected to increase to $182 billion. Let's look at the US, the second biggest luxury good market, which affluent consumers are the main consumer group. It is also expected to grow about $9 billion until 2024. So, of course, these affluent consumers are an important consumer group, but this group is difficult to satisfy. They demand products and services that fit their lifestyle, needs, and live up to or even exceed their extremely high expectations. Affluent consumers have high ambitions in both their personal lives and careers. Affluent consumers are image conscious. They prioritize brand status over the practical value of the product. Now that we talked about high income consumers who are affluent consumers and how they spend luxury goods, let's look at the consumer view of luxury goods. SRI Consulting Business Intelligence, this is a research group company, divides consumers into three groups based on their attitudes towards luxury. The first group sees luxury as a luxury is functional. These consumers use their money to buy things that will last and have enduring value. They conduct extensive pre purchase research and make logical decisions rather than emotional or impulsive choices. The second group sees luxury as a reward. These consumers tend to be younger than the first group, but older than the third group. I will explain the third group. They use luxury goods to say, I have made it. The desire to be successful and to demonstrate their success to others motivates these consumers to purchase conspicuous luxury items such as high end automobiles, cars, and homes in exclusive communities. The third group sees luxury as an indulgence. This group is the smallest of the three and tends to include younger consumers and slightly more males than the other two groups. To these consumers, the purpose of owning luxury is to be extremely lavish and self indulgent. This group is willing to pay a premium for goods that express their individuality and make others take notice. They have a more emotional approach to luxury spending, and they are more likely than the other two groups to make impulse purchases. Although many people do in fact become self made millionaires, they often encounter a problem. Although it's not the worst problem one could think of. After they have become wealthy and change their social status, the label Nouveau Riche describes consumers who recently achieved their wealth and who don't have the benefit of years of training to learn how to spend it. Pity de Nouveau Riche may suffer from status anxiety. They monitor the cultural environment to ensure that they do the right thing, wear the right clothes, and get seen at the right places, use the right caterer, and so on. Their flamboyant consumption is an example of symbolic self completion because they try to display symbols they believe that have class to make up for an internal lack of assurance about the correct way to behave. So these people, nouveau riche, actually are the new rich who doesn't know how to spend their money, who doesn't know how to behave, although they have the money to go at elitist places or high society jet set places, they don't know how to behave, how to dress up, and how to I don't network with the other rich people around them. We typically assume that marketers are targeting consumers at the top of the pyramid. Those are consumers with the highest incomes, but they're also a small percentage of the world market. As I said, they are 1%. There are also marketers targeting the bottom of the pyramid. 78% of the global population is actually low income consumers whose purchasing power is under $10,000 per year. Although poor people obviously have less to spend than the rich ones, they have the same basic needs as everyone else. Low income families purchase staples such as milk, orange juice, and tea at the same rates as average income families. Minimum wage level households spend more than average on out of pocket healthcare costs, rent, and the food they eat at home, which makes bottom of the pyramid consumers a very important group of consumers for marketers. The figure on the slide illustrates how marketers can market to low income consumers. The A's include awareness, affordability, availability, and acceptability. If you want to be available, you can reduce your cost curve, shorten your supply chain, select and support retailers, localize your sourcing. If you are going to tailor your offer to the market, you can go with the acceptability. You can focus development on your customers, employ innovative thinking to meet customer needs, and establish local R&D, research and development. If you are going to go with the awareness, you can promote offerings through mix of outlets, go choosing different channels. You can form partnerships with public and non-governmental organizations. And if you're going to go with the restructuring of your value chain and go with affordability to appeal to them, you can reduce your packaging size for low price per unit, so your item is more affordable. You can maintain operations on zero working capital or near zero, as close to zero. or leverage scale effects in sourcing network. So these are different strategies as a marketer you can use to appeal to low income consumers. Okay, now our second learning objective, which focuses on social class. We are going to discuss how consumer behavior relates to social class. Okay, let's start with the pecking order. We develop a pecking order that ranks us in terms of our relative standing in society. This rank determines our access to such resources as education, housing, and consumer goods. People try to move up in the social order to improve their ranking. We group consumers into social classes that say a lot about where they stand in society. We use the term social class to describe the overall rank of people in a society. People who belong to the same social class have approximately equal social standing in the community. They work in similar occupations and they tend to have similar lifestyles. We, for example, tend to marry people in a similar social class to ours, which is a tendency that sociologists call homogamy or assortative mating. Social class is as much a state of being as it is of having. It is also a matter of what you do with your money and how you define your role in society. Although we may not like the idea that some members of society are better off or different from others, most consumers do acknowledge the existence of different classes and the effect of class membership on consumption. Social stratification refers to the creation of artificial divisions among people such that some members get more resources than others by virtue of their relative standing, power, or control in the group. In groups, some resources are earned through hard work, and this is work as achieved status, while others may get resources because of who they are, which is known as ascribed status. Most groups do exhibit a status hierarchy where some members are better off than others. They may have more authority or power, or other members simply like or respect them more. Social class includes multiple determining factors, but two highly influential factors are occupational prestige and income. In a system in which, like it or not, we define people to a great extent by what they do for a living, occupational prestige is one way we evaluate their worth. I don't like it, but it is how it is. Hierarchies of occupational prestige tend to be quite stable over time and across cultures. A typical ranking includes a variety of professional and business occupations at the top, such as CEO of a large corporation, physician, MD, college professor. Again, I don't like to describe people according to their occupations and tell that they're more prestigious than others, but I'm explaining how the system works, especially when it comes to consumption, and how the book that we are actually following for this class describes them as well. It's not what I believe in personally, but I have to explain you the way the system and the marketing and the marketers work, the system they use and the understanding they use when they classify consumers and when they create their communication campaigns to target their audience better. So what I was saying, A typical ranking includes doctors, CEOs of a large corporation, physicians, college professors, whereas jobs that hover near the bottom include shoe shiner, ditch digger, or garbage collector. I hate, again, classifying jobs and people in groups, but I have to explain you with examples for you to better understand. Because a person's occupation links strongly to his use of leisure time, allocation of family resources, aesthetic preferences, and political orientation, many social scientists consider it the single best indicator of social class. Let's understand social stratification. The process of social stratification refers to this creation of artificial divisions that I was talking about in my previous slides. Whether rewards go to the best and the brightest or to someone who happens to be related to the boss, allocations are rarely equal within a social group. Most groups exhibit a structure or a status hierarchy. A worldview is another way to differentiate among social classes. To generalize, the world of the working class or the lower middle class is more intimate and constructed. For example, working class men are likely to name local sports figures as heroes and are less likely to take long vacation trips to out of the way places. Their immediate needs, such as a new refrigerator or a TV, tend to dictate buying behavior, while the higher classes focus on more long term goals, such as saving for college tuition or retirement. Working class consumers depend heavily on relatives for emotional support and tend to orient themselves in terms of the local community rather than the world at large. They are more likely to be conservative and family oriented, and for working class consumers, maintaining the appearance of one's home and the property is a priority, regardless of the size of the house. Many well-off consumers seems to be stressed or unhappy despite or even because of their wealth, a condition researchers called affluenza. So affluenza means to be stressed or unhappy because of your income level or wealth. Cosmopolitanism is another aspect of worldview that is starting to receive more attention by consumer behavior researchers such as me, who define a cosmopolitan as someone who tries to be open to the world and who strives for diverse experiences. Don't confuse this term, cosmopolitanism, with the popular cocktail, of course. Although we equate money with social class, they are by no means synonymous. Additional income does not necessarily propel someone to a higher class. One problem is that even if a family adds one or more wage earners and increases its household income, each additional job is likely to be lower in status than the primary wage earner's job. In addition, these members don't necessarily pool their earnings toward the common good of the family. So, is social class or income a better predictor of consumer behavior? The answer is actually, the answer partly depends on the type of the product. Do people buy it largely for its functional value? What does it do? What it does? Or for its symbolic value, the impression it conveys to others? So let's look at the type of the goods, social class is better predictor of lower to moderately priced symbolic purchases like cosmetics or liquor, alcohol. Income is better predictor of major non-status, non-symbolic expenditures such as major appliances. A marketer needs both social class and income to predict expensive symbolic products such as cars and homes. It is becoming more difficult to identify social class from product choices. Individuals' desire to make a statement about their social class or the class to which they hope to belong influences the products they like and dislike. Social class remains an important way to categorize consumers, yes, but marketers fail to use social class information as effectively as they could because of the reasons listed on the slide. Marketers ignore status inconsistencies, they ignore intergenerational mobility, they ignore subjective social class, where consumers think that they belong to another social class while in reality they belong to another social class. They ignore consumers' aspiration to change class standing by making aspirational purchases. What is an aspirational purchase? Aspirational purchase is a purchase that you make from a luxury brand once a year, or just you save your money for years to make one aspirational purchases. I'm giving an example. A college student with a limited income and funding saves for 4 years to buy a Louis Vuitton purse, for example. That's an aspirational consumption. And marketers ignore the social status of working wives, who are actually becoming one of the most important consumer groups in the market, which I explained in my previous slide. A taste culture describes consumers in terms of their aesthetic and intellectual preferences. This concept helps to eliminate the important yet sometimes subtle distinctions in consumption choices among the social classes. Differences in consumption patterns between the upper and upper middle classes and between the middle and working classes are disappearing. However, strong differences still emerge in terms of how consumers spend their discretionary income and leisure time. Upper and upper middle class people are more likely to visit museums and attend live theater, and middle class consumers are more likely to camp and go fishing. The upper classes are more likely to listen to all news programs, whereas the middle classes are more likely to tune into country music. Taste culture is a part of psychographic segmentation in marketing that we use, which tells us about how our target audience spend their leisure time and where they spend their discretionary income, which are two very important indicators of consumption when you want to market your product to a specific group of people. In one study of social differences in taste, researchers cataloged homeowners' possessions as they sat in their living rooms and asked them about their income and occupation. They identified clusters of furnishings and decorative items that seemed to appear together with some regularity. They found different clusters based on social status as shown in the figure on the slide. For example, they tended to find a cluster that consisted of religious objects, artificial flowers, and still life portraits in relatively lower status living rooms, whereas they were likely to catalog a cluster of abstract paintings, sculptures, and modern furniture in a higher status home. Another approach to social class focuses on the codes. The way consumers express and interpret meanings are called codes. So, this approach to social class focuses on the codes people within different social strata use. It's valuable for marketers to map these codes because they can use concepts and terms that their target customers will relate to. Marketing appeals we construct with class differences in mind result in quite different messages. For example, a life insurance advertising that a company targets to a lower class person might depict, in very simple terms and straightforward terms, a hardworking family man who feels good immediately after he buys a policy. An upscale appeal might, on the other hand, depict a more affluent, older couple surrounded by photos of their children and grandchildren. It might include extensive copy that plugs the satisfaction of planning for the future. These two ways to communicate product benefits incorporate different types of codes. Restricted codes focus on the content of objects, not on relationships among objects. Elaborated codes, in contrast, are more complex and depend on a more sophisticated worldview. These code differences extend to the way consumers approach basic concepts such as time, social relationships, and objects. The slide, in the slide, you can find a table that summarizes some differences between these two code types. For example, restricted codes use a language with few qualifiers, few adjectives or adverbs. They use concrete, descriptive, tangible symbolism, while elaborated codes in an advertising use large vocabulary, complex conceptual hierarchy. Restricted codes, when it comes to social relationships, stress attributes of individuals over formal roles, and elaborated codes use stress formal role structure and instrumental relationships. Restricted codes focus on present, have only general notion of future. Elaborated codes focus on instrumental relationship between present activities and future rewards. The Burning Man Festival, I'm sure you have heard about it, began in 1986 as a summer solstice celebration on a San Francisco beach that attracted a small group of people. Some of them built an 8 foot tall wooden man and set it on fire during the festival. Over the years, the event attracted more and more people who celebrated alternative lifestyles with different costumes and primitive camps, different music styles, and so on. As the event grew over time, organizers moved the festival to the desert to accommodate more attendees, more people. Since that time, however, this countercultural festival has evolved into something quite different than how it started. So now it became a huge annual retreat in the Black Rock Desert north of Reno, Nevada, that attracts wealthy technology moguls to show one another just how much money they can spend. Ridiculously. The transformation of Burning Man from what it used to be, known as a countercultural celebration, to a showcase for wealth, illustrates Bourdieu's, a French philosopher, concept of social capital. In the process, paradoxically, it's not unusual to find that the people who originated the activity can no longer afford to participate to the same festival that they started, like the original Burning Man hippies or longtime residents who again started the festival. On the other hand, Bourdieu has other capitals that he mentions, such as cultural capital. Cultural capital refers to a set of distinctive and socially rare tastes and practices and knowledge of refined behavior that admits a person into the realm of the upper class. If you have a good education, if you have a occupational prestigious job, then it is considered that you have a cultural capital that makes you different than the rest of the society. The psychic income we get when we post reviews that others validate creates a reputation economy in which the currency people earn is approval rather than cold hard cash. Same the actually applies when we post a picture on Instagram and get a validation in terms of likes and comments from people who follow us. The currency we get is again the approval, justification, verification from others rather than cash. But today's influencers, as we discussed, is actually turned it into hard cash. Those likes and followers and comments turned into a real currency, which Bourdieu call as economic capital. Once you start to make money from your cultural capital, which is your education and occupational capital that you bring, your family, your where you born, your taste culture, everything goes under cultural capital. Once you start to make money, let's say in online environment, you have an Instagram account and people start to follow you. Your followers are your social capital, the people who follow you. This is your network of people that you know or they know you. And once you turn it into a business and start to work as an influencer and promote products, you make economic capital. That's why we call online social capital, especially on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. All your followers are called your online social capital. And the reputation economy is actually related to influencer marketing, because the follower numbers that they have in millions or thousands are actually their currency. It's that's created a reputation economy based on popularity and reputation. Okay, let's explain online gated community. Like exclusive country clubs, online gated communities that selectively allow access to some people may offer a high degree of social capital to the lucky few who pass the test. So, here in an online gated community, you get an access to a group, to an online community. It can be a blog, it can be a forum, it can be as exclusive group, a community that see themselves high, that give once you pass the test and they think you belong to them, you belong to the group, you are suitable for their group, they accept you to their club. We have talked about Veblen before in conspicuous consumption. I'm gonna go back to Veblen again when I'm explaining the status symbols. For Veblen, we buy things to create individuous distinction. That means that we use them to inspire envy in others through our display of wealth or power. Veblen coined the term conspicuous consumption to refer to people's desires to provide prominent visible evidence of their ability to afford luxury goods. This phenomenon of conspicuous consumption was, especially for Veblen, most evident among what he termed the leisure class people, for whom productive work is taboo. To Veblen, wives are an economic resource. He criticized the decorative role of women as rich men showered them with expensive clothes, pretentious homes, and a life of leisure as a way to advertise their own wealth. Note that today he might have argued the same for a smaller number of husbands. Today we refer to these women as trophy wives. In recent years, the tables have turned as older women who increasingly boost the same incomes and social capital as their male peers, and those older women seek out younger men as arm candy, these so called cougars. In contrast, some people may feel the need to almost hit others over the head with their bling. They use loud singles. One set of researchers labels these differences brand prominence. Brands like Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Mercedes vary in terms of how blatant their status appeals are in advertisement and on the products themselves. Or in other words, the type of status signaling they employ. So the how big are their logos on the products, how big their logos are on the advertisements. As the competition to accumulate status symbols escalates, sometimes the best tactic is to switch gears and go in reverse. One way to do this is to deliberately avoid status symbols. So, what you do, you seek status by mocking it. Social scientists call this sophisticated form of conspicuous consumption as parody display. Hence, the popularity of old, ripped blue jeans, or more likely the ones companies stonewash and treat so that they look old and ripped, or utility vehicles such as the Jeeps among the upper classes, like the Coldwells in the chapter opener, and the brands with a strong blue-collar heritage, like One Dutch Truckers hats and Red Wing Boot, is a parody display. How do people who buy luxury goods handle it when that brand is counterfeited? They may flight, reclaim, or abbrand. Flight means they stop using the brand. They stop using the brand because they don't want to be mislabeled as a lesser status person who buys fake products. Reclamation means they try to establish their long-term relationship with the real brand. They go out of their way to emphasize their long relationship with the brand, but express concern that its image will be tarnished. Or they abbrand. Abbrand means they minimize the visibility of their luxury goods so that only those who also have the real thing know that they also have the real thing. They disguise their luxury items in the belief that truly high status people do not need to display expensive logos, whereas those who do betray lower status. Consumers engage in conspicuous consumption as a way to display status markers, yet the prominence of these markers varies from products with large recognizable emblems to those with no logo at all. Those in the known can recognize a subtle status marker. In contrast, others may try to use loud signals to ensure others spot their status markers. These differences are labeled as brand prominence. Consumers in this typology are assigned to one of four consumption groups based on their wealth and need for status. These are patricians, parvenus, posers, and proletarians. It is not surprising that those who are wealthier and don't have a high need for status, such as patricians, rely on quiet signals and likely will be put off by excessive displays. They don't like to show what brand that they are wearing. Marketers for status brands need to understand these distinctions because their customers may or may not value products with explicit logos and other highly visible cues that signal conspicuous consumption. For example, parvenus associate with other haves and want to disassociate themselves from have-nots. They use loud signals. They like to show the logos. They like to show that they can buy and afford those brands. While proletarians they don't have a need for status. Their need for status is low, but their wealth is also low. They are on the have-nots group. They don't engage in signaling. Posers aspire to have, they like to have, they like to be, have a high need for status, but they don't have the money, they cannot afford it, so they mimic the parvenus. And patricians, they have a low need for status, but they have a high wealth, so they don't like to signal. The brands that they use quiet signals. I think it's very interesting, those typology of status. If you're gonna work in the luxury goods market, you have to definitely know what your and if you are gonna be actually consulting the designers, you definitely need to know what your consumers are looking for, because some brands put the brand name on a t-shirt, almost a t-shirt size, and consumers hate it. They don't want to show that they're buying it because they also think that it looks fake. We have reviewed many concepts in this chapter. The key points are noted in the slide, and I'm going to read it. We learned both personal and social conditions influence how we spend our money. We learned that we group consumers into social classes that say a lot about where they stand in the society. We discussed that a person's desire to make a statement about social class influences the products he likes and dislikes. And of course, we talked about that lifestyle and psychographics as the key to many marketing strategies. When we want to reach our target audience, we definitely need to know their lifestyle, their leisure activities, their discretionary income, and their other psychographics. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.